Morning, boys and girls. This is Mrs. Murphy. Today we are going to do some problem solving with elapsed time. This is lesson 12.9, and you may remember that in the last video I made, I mentioned that elapsed is kind of a fancy word that just means gone by. Like, in other words, this is time that has gone by. So let's take a look at this problem. And I'm going to show you, well, let's look at our essential question, sorry. So the essential question is, how can you use this strategy, draw a diagram? And I'm going to be showing you how to do that, and it's a really great strategy. And we're going to use that to solve elapsed time problems. So here's a problem for us to think about. Dora and her brother Kyle spent 1 hour and 35 minutes doing yard work. Then they stopped for lunch at 1:20 p.m. At what time did they start doing the yard work? So again, let's just kind of dig into this problem. It says, what do I need to find out? Well, I need to find out what time they started doing their work. That's what I'm looking for. What time they started. So what time did they start? So I'm looking for their start time. Okay, and what information do I need to use? Well, I need to use the elapsed time, right? So the time that's gone by, so the elapsed time, in other words, that 1 hour and 35 minutes that they, and the time that they, stopped for lunch. Okay. So I'm going to draw this diagram out to help me figure out, and then I'm going to use this strategy of counting backwards on my timeline to find out their start time when they went outside and started doing this yard work. Okay, so let's take a look at what is actually in our book and of the timeline that they presented. And then I'm going to show you a different timeline as well. Okay, theirs is very detailed. You might not want to make it quite this detailed, but this is a good place for us to start. So it says, to solve the problem, I draw a timeline that shows the end time as 1:20 p.m. Now don't forget, let's just take a minute and think about this one more time. They give us the stop time. They tell us they stopped at 1:20, and we have to find out what time they started. So when I make a diagram like this, I'm going to begin my jumping on my timeline at the end time. We know that's the time they stopped. They stopped for lunch at 1:20 p.m. So we're going to do one big jump of an hour, because we know that they worked for an hour and 35 minutes. So we're going to do one big jump of an hour. And if I were going to actually put that time here, I think it would be helpful. So if they ended at 1:20, an hour before that would have been 12:20. I'm going to erase that and make that a little bit bigger so you can see it, right? So I'm talking about this spot right here. This is 12:20 p.m., by the way, which is afternoon. And then they show all of these jumps adding up to 35 minutes, and they jumped by 5 minutes each. Okay, so they basically even set their timeline up in increments of 5 minutes. There's 5 minutes in each one of these spots on this timeline. Okay, that's a lot of work, all right? But let's get to the punchline here. Let's get to our answer. When did they start working? Well, they started doing the yard work at 11:45 a.m. Okay, so I'm going to write that. Okay, and you should know this by now that at 12 o'clock noon, we switch from AM to PM. So the morning time is AM, and as soon as we get to, like, let's say lunchtime or 12 o'clock noon, then the clock switches over to be called PM. So we definitely want to know that. But I want to show you a different way of figuring this out, a way that I think might be a little easier for you to understand. Let me raise this up here a little bit. I've got a couple of problems on here that I want to show you, but look what I did. I made my line. Okay, so you can do this too. This is the draw the diagram that you're going to want to do. Just make yourself a timeline. So I just made one line, and then the information from my problem gave me the end time or the stop time. You can call it either one. End time or the stop time, it doesn't matter. But they stopped doing yard work at 1:20 p.m. And then on my line, I did not make all of these marks to indicate all the minutes. That's a lot of work. So what I simply did was I did one big jump back of an hour, one big jump back of an hour. So I said minus 1 hour, and that would get me to 12:20 p.m. I still had to go 35 more minutes. So what I thought to myself was, well, if I just jump back 20 minutes, I'll get myself right there to 12 noon. So I subtracted 20 minutes. I went and jumped back 20 minutes, and I got to 12 noon. Those are easier, friendly numbers for my brain to work with. And then I had to go 15 minutes more because this 20 and this 15 would give me that total of 35 minutes. And we know, again, that they spent 1 hour and 35 minutes with their yard work. So from this 12 o'clock, I jump back 15 more minutes, and I end up at 11:45 a.m. because now I'm before it's even 12 noon. So I'm in the a.m. So that's how I do mine. I like to set up my timeline with whatever the problem gives me. They might give me the start time, they might give me the end time. In this particular problem, they gave me the end time. So I had to jump backwards all the way to find my start time. Okay, thanks for sticking with me. Let's take a look at the next question. It says, what if Dora and Kyle spent 50 minutes doing yard work and they stopped for lunch at 12:30 p.m.? What time would they have started doing yard work? I'm sorry if you can hear that phone ringing in the background. That's not my phone. Okay, here we go. It should stop in a minute. But let me show you how I did that. So one more time, they stopped. We have our stop time at 12:30 p.m. So I made my, there we go. I made my timeline right here. I made my timeline, and I know that my stop time or my end time was 12:30 p.m. But I know that they worked for 50 minutes, so I have to jump back 50 minutes. Well, I can easily in my brain jump back to a friendly number of 12 o'clock p.m. So that was 30 minutes. And 30 plus 20 equals our total of 50 minutes. So I knew from 12 o'clock I had to jump back another 20. So another 20 would get me to 11:40 a.m., which was my start time. Now, if you're not familiar with telling time, or if you don't do it very often, or if you use a digital clock, you might want to start practicing on an analog clock, and you might want to ask mom and dad or grandma or grandpa or big brother or sister to help you tell time and to help you practice telling time. It's a skill that a lot of kids need some help with, so don't be embarrassed or worried if you don't feel that you're really solid with telling time. All you need to do is practice. Okay, hey Ben, this is a story about you riding your bike. Ben started riding his bike at 10:05 a.m. He stopped 23 minutes later when his friend Robbie asked him to play kickball. At what time did Ben stop riding his bike? So in this case, we have our start time of 10:05. We have the fact that he rode his bike for 23 minutes. And we want to know, well, what time did he stop riding his bike? Ben, what time did you stop riding your bike so that you could play kickball with your friend Robbie? Okay, this is the timeline that I made up for this problem. Now in this one, I was given my start time. My start time was 10:05 a.m. I'm going to write that down on this side of my timeline that I'm drawing, right? I know the start time, 10:05. Well, I know that he rode his bike, Ben was riding his bike for 23 minutes. So I'm just going to break it into some friendly numbers for my head, for my brain. I'm going to jump 20 minutes first. And I even write on the top of there so I know what I'm doing. I'm adding 20 minutes. I'm jumping up 20 minutes, and then I get to 10:25 a.m. And it was 23 minutes that Ben was riding his bike. So I'm going to add 3 more minutes to that because 20 plus 3 is the 23. And I end up at 10:28 a.m. Okay, that's my stop time. So drawing out your number line is super duper helpful. And whether or not they give you, if they give you the start time, then you're going to enter that here and write start. And you're going to do your jumps going in this direction. And you're going to figure out your end time. They might give you the opposite, right? They might give you, I'm going to use the same one here just for the heck of it. They might give you the end time first, and then you have to jump backwards in time, going back in time. How cool is that? And end up with your start time. So it depends on what information you're given in your word problem. And you know that when you solve these, you should read them twice, circle or underline the important information, and really practice using this diagram, this timeline of jumping forward or jumping backwards. I find it super helpful. It puts a big smile on my face, a grin from ear to ear. I find it really helpful, and I think you will too. Okay, so you can watch this video again, or you can go right ahead and start your Google form. But good luck. Bye.